Hello fellow humans, today I want to talk about tier 10 premium and collector tanks. Obviously the M60 is not the premium, it's just masquerading as one. If you like tank destroyers, then the Badger could be an option. It's not included in the 5. What can be an even better option though is liking and subscribing to the channel. And special thank you to my channel members as well. And as the first one, well, I mean, what else could it be? It is the Chieftain Mark 6, a tank that's sold relatively cheap. Sometimes you can get it for 17.5k gold. Hopefully again, unless Wargaming decides to do some shenanigans here. Now, I just sorted the tanks basically by how many people play them. And the Chieftain is a extremely popular tank, and it's also a very good tank. Why is that? Because it combines pretty much everything. It has a great gun, besides the premium penetration, which is only 310 millimeters. It has APCR, so it'll do. Calibrated doesn't really make sense with APCR, so the premium penetration is the biggest weakness of this vehicle, just like the cupola on top of the vehicle. However, the armor is very good, the mobility is pretty good, and the gun also has over 3000 DPM, so it is a very lovely tank overall. Now, tier 10, it's not ideal to make creds in the first place, because obviously you will need to fire a couple of premium rounds here and there, and tier 10 is expensive, extremely expensive. Now, you will undoubtedly, well, should be doing more damage in tier 10 that you are doing in tier 8, but tier 8 tanks are cheaper to run and have, in a lot of cases, significantly higher credit coefficients. The average for tier 10 is about 140%. I think all of them actually have 140%, if I'm not mistaken there. But that's not great compared to the 170, 180 some tier 8s do have. And, you know, at that point, you're better off doing playing a tier 8 to get your creds there. So if you buy a tier 10 to make creds, I would think again and get a tier 8, because they're simply better at doing that. And, you know, you also probably have more fun, because tier 10 is sometimes a bit painful, as you can see in this game right here, where after 2 minutes I never had a team to begin with. However, despite that, I have no idea how the TVP and the Cron run took this long. However, that's just 3.6k damage in 2 minutes without a team, and that's the strength of this type of tank concept. And the same concept of tank is also true for the concept 1B. Now, this concept of tank is basically always the same. Solid mobility, good gun, gun depression, and a turret that you can bounce shots with. It may have a cupola, but it'll work, basically. And you'll see more of that later. Now, this replay is a bit wonky, because I decided to try hard a bit. And that looks like this. So, yeah. It was 2 AM and I was listening to music, so it looks like I'm consuming substances, but I'm not.
Stop it. Get some help.
Now, the concept will be is very much in a similar scenario, right? You've got the Hologram gameplay, you've got the good enough mobility, you can kind of chase medium tanks with it, but it's just about not quite enough. So, at this point, you can see a pattern here, right? You want to have a tank that's universal. You have something like an Object 260, you have something in the 5A. I mean, let's forget about the 5A. That tank doesn't exist. Like, ignore it. It doesn't exist. But like a 260, it's just very situational, right? It works in some cases, in some cases it doesn't. A tank like this pretty much works all the time. The problem with the concept, really, it has more turret armor, and it trades for that with gun performance. You have a lot lower DPM than the other Chieftain, and you also only have 380 alpha damage, which is not that great. And obviously, one of the other strengths that the Chieftain has is the gun is incredibly accurate at 0.3. Now, the concept is, well, 0.31, so it's about the same. However, the aim time on this thing is a bit less. So, you trade, basically, armor for gun performance on this vehicle. And the mobility is somewhat equal, almost the same, essentially, so you probably won't really notice the difference. Now, this tank, it's not been sold too great, unfortunately, so if it's in the shop for 20k gold, this is an absolutely amazing tank to pick up, and you definitely should at that point. However, I doubt whether that will happen again or ever. So, because Wargaming has clearly basically made it clear with a lot of bundles in recent times that they are inflating the prices quite a bit. And at this point, 2.8k damage doesn't sound to be too good, but all you gotta do is go hull down, hide your hull, boom. what you want to do. And this is the only pro tip that you pretty much ever need, is that you always want to get an unfair advantage, right? If you have an unfair advantage, you can use it to win. Duh. Now, how do you get that? Either by you know more than the enemy, you have a tank that is more suited for the certain situation than the enemy. Like, obviously, if you're playing hull down in this vehicle against an E100 that is standing out in the open field, you absolutely have an advantage there. So, you never want to enter fair fights, you always want to pick unfair fights. Some tanks, that's not possible, like a mouse, it's too slow, and it has a specific role of you take damage. But for most tanks, try to get an unfair advantage on the enemy in any situation. For example, the E50M right here could just run away, but he can't really because, I mean, with 4v1, he can't go anywhere, and boom, that's 3.6 damage. Very beautiful. Chieftain and the concept are very good. And now we get to the same concept again in the Super Conqueror. Now, this vehicle is, again, pretty similar. Now, the gun on this tank is a lot less accurate, though. However, you gain back a bit of the DPM. You go back to 400 alpha damage. You have very good dispersion on this tank. And you have extremely good turret armor as well. In terms of mobility, it's a slightly bit slower, but basically all those three tanks functionally play the same role, slightly different. And that's why I recommend them, because this is what works best, really. And obviously there are, I mean, the 5A, we can ignore the 5A, that doesn't exist. You have the MXM454, which is great as long as you don't turn. And the second you do turn, you become absolutely utterly useless, because everything can be penned and you have bad DPM. 260, the Object 260 would be fine, but it's not as good as these guys. And then the Russian medium tanks are, again, just about fine. And you don't want to buy fine. You can play fine, you can get them for free, but you want to buy good, right? You don't want to buy the fine tanks. Also, you don't want to buy the MX-30B, because that's a whole another level of, yeah. So, but I don't know. I will probably be invaded by France if I would say what I think about the MX-30B. But then again, no. So, the Super Conqueror is another very great choice. It's the same, pretty much the same concept again. So, if you have two of them, like if you let's say you have the Chieftain and you have the concept, there's no point in buying the Super Conqueror because it'll just play the same pretty much. However, I definitely recommend getting one of these three. Absolutely do. With a lot of the other, like, I mean, there are 17. So not that much to choose from anyway, and some of them are a bit questionable. And you don't have a lot of choice otherwise. The M60 isn't even a premium tank. It has a credit coefficient of like 80%, so it's... Why the hell would you buy it? It plays the exact same as the M40 pattern, so there's zero reason to buy that vehicle. And here's the thing. If anyone tells you they can noticeably feel a difference in battle between the M60 and the M48, they're full of shit. It's that simple. Obviously, if you can see the difference, you know it, cool, you can spot it that way. But if you would play both of them blind, it will be the exact same. Now, let's change to something that's not the exact same, and something that is different, but good in its own way, and that is the VK90. Now, this tank is the side-scraping god of World Tanks Blitz. Surprisingly, you have somewhat solid mobility. It's almost on par with the other three, really, in terms of the power-to-weight ratio. So that's a good thing. The traverse speed are, you know, marginally different as well. You know, here's the thing. You're not going to notice a difference in traverse speed between 25 degrees and 26 degrees. If you do, you don't. Like, you can think that you do, but yeah, don't actually. So, if you wouldn't know, you wouldn't notice. So, at this point, this vehicle is very good at side-scraping. Now, the problem with this tank is it has a turret at the back, and the back turret means that you have to peek your weak side front. Now, in terms of crew protection, that is amazing. In terms of crew protection, it's absolutely amazing, you know, because if the engine in front of the crew, that can sort of protect it, unless you put the driver in front of the engine, like you do in the mouse, then that completely destroys it. But in terms of crew protection, it can help quite a lot. However, the problem, if you have the turret at the rear, you have to always poke your front first. And the German track wheels are very vulnerable. So you want to try to always angle this tank around the corner. And never just peek at... You don't want to do with any tank. However, you don't really want to peek out of the corner. And at this point, just side scrape out. It doesn't have to be a flat house. You can side scrape on whatever is possible. And it'll work about just fine. Now, the VK90 is one of the best super heavies. It's basically the mouse on the VK72, but it makes creds and it actually plays well. It can be pretty enjoyable. And this vehicle's accuracy is somewhat on par with that of the Super Conqueror. Like, basically it has better accuracy, but worse aim time. So you gotta decide that for yourself. Now, it does also have 10 degrees of gun depression, which is obviously a lovely feature, and all the other 3 tanks already have as well, which is it's just so much better. Like, if you have gun depression, you can play so much more in the game. So many more positions that you could otherwise dream of playing, you can now get to. Now you can make them use of. Like, for example, we go back to the Object 260. What does it help you when you have good turret armor, when you have 6 degrees of gun depression? You can't use it in as many positions as you should be able to. So, there's that. And we don't talk about the 5A in the first place. So, at this point, I have no team, which, given that the average coordination and skill level in World of Tanks Blitz is somewhere on par of that of a Russian conscript, as in it doesn't exist, it's not really great. But that's 5k damage nonetheless right here. And you can just see, I just played balls to the wall. I went for it. And this tank can be a lot of fun if you just get past that damn back turret of it. And now we get to the Leopard 1 and E50M's illegitimate child, and that is the KBZ-50. Now, unfortunately, this thing hasn't been available for reasonable consumption yet. You know, 20k gold, this will be a very good thing. Now, in terms of the medium tanks as well, I mean, there are only 2 tank destroyers I already talked about, though. 268 version 4, why bother? If you think the 268 version 4 is a tank for you, just get the E3, it'll play better. So, in terms of the medium tanks, because there's no light tanks, in terms of the medium tanks, you got the MX-30B, that doesn't exist. You got the M60, that's just the M48 pattern in brown. You have the 2 Soviet ones, the T-22 and the Object 907, which are both fine, but fine isn't worth buying. And then you end up with this one, which has a very good combination of, again, you got the gun depression, you got the turret armor, you have high DPM, you unfortunately have very, very low alpha damage. That's the problem with this vehicle. And, by the way, what do you think of the new shell icons in Blitz? Gotta ask that. What do you think of the new shell icons in Blitz? Put in the comments, I would really like to know. If they're good, if they're bad, what do you think of them? And the biggest downside of this tank is obviously its alpha damage, which is not great. Other than that, the mobility is very good. The turret armor, if you wiggle it back and forth, is very good as well. And, unfortunately, it's just only been sold in crates, and that's just not good. That's never good. However, if it ever comes in the shop for a good price, and it works out, this one is the tier 10 medium premium tank to get. Now, is it as good as an E50M? I would personally say no. And also not as good as a Leo, because it's a mix of both. And if you mix both of those things, a lot of the times you end up with something that isn't quite great at both of them. So, but it does combine those two very, very nicely, and you do have pretty good power to weight ratio at 20. Not outstanding, not amazing, but it's very good. It's not as, I think the Leopard has like 37 or something crazy like that, so it's definitely not on that kind of level. However, it is pretty much the only one that's worth it. That's why it's on the list, right? But it's worth it if it's sold for a good price, right? That's how Blitz works. Now, hope you enjoyed the list. And what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Put it in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye!